Hello, welcome to Insight, everyone. I'm Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. Thank you for joining us.
The cutoff mark of 150 set by the Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board, Jamb, for the 2025 admissions into Nigerian universities has given way to debate. Quite robust, I must say. This debate essentially revolves around the issue of quality versus quantity, if you get my drift. But more importantly, it also hints at how the concept of massification in university education can be adjusted to align with improved quality through support to prospective undergraduates. Well, we will unbundle all of that when I take on my first guest on the issue. Elizabeth's got something else quite germane and critical to talk about. Elizabeth?
Of course, we'll also be talking about diaspora engagement and provide valuable insights that will help diaspora communities contribute meaningfully to the development of their countries of origin.
Very well then, let's kickstart the program.
Whatever the issues are,
the National Assembly is constitutionally empowered to scrutinize,
however complex or intricate.
We have involved all the academia, the members of the academia. We have involved the academies.
Be it government policies or in fact any issue of public concern.
Our job is to help you gain clarity and make sense of it all.
This is not really healthy for our democracy.
There's a lot of aggrievance in terms of who has been in power longest and who becomes the governor of the state.
It's also in the quality of food being consumed.
After all, perception is insight.
And gaining understanding is also getting insight.
Now, my first conversation centers on transforming Nigeria's educational ecosystem amid turbulent demographic and global forces. And yes, I'm using the 2025 Jamb cutoff mark of 150 as the basis for this conversation. You know, since the announcement at this year's Jamb's policy meeting, the debates between supporters and opponents of the policy have centered on one key question, and that is if and whether the Nigeria's university cutoff mark is a surrender to mediocrity or a necessary step towards inclusion. Well, I hope to get some clarity on this matter from my guest. My guest is Aniel Amisu Jafaru, an educationist and IT expert. Thank you so much for joining me on Insight. Aniel, it's good to have you back here.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure being here.
You know, incidentally, the last time we talked on this program, you and I, it was on the same Jamb, and we talked about digitizing examinations. And incidentally, that was when Jamb was just starting. Here we are again, using the Jamb cutoff mark as the basis for our conversation. So I think I should get right into it and tell you that I was inspired, to having this conversation because I came across Comrade Sanusi's Mekudi's commentary on the issue. And I thought, okay, why not use that as a platform to push the conversation further. And by the way, maybe I should just let my viewer know that the good comrade is an entrepreneur, an intellectual by all means and standards, and is also considered a socialist politician. Well, having said that, let me get into this whole argument of 150 seeming too low a bar for students seeking entry into institutions meant to produce tomorrow's doctors, tomorrow's engineers, and some of tomorrow's best policymakers. I would like for you to balance that against a reality shaped by Nigeria's exploding population, a struggling education system, and the ever-growing demand for higher learning, particularly by young Nigerians. Which way are you leaning? Which side of the divide are you? Do you think Jamb, the cutoff mark of 2025, which is 150 over 400, is necessarily a surrender to mediocrity and erosion of standards? Or do you, on this other side, think it might be a necessary and pragmatic response to inclusion and perhaps addressing the demographic tsunami confronting us, considering the increasing number of applicants into Nigerian tertiary institutions each year? Where do you fall?
Okay, so I should be pardoned to have a third opinion.
Okay, sure, why not? Why not?
Okay, so
Yeah, I completely understand the comrade's standpoint. It's when you have that very large number of persons seeking to gain admission into a higher institution, it's just logical for you to say, let's create a room for us to accommodate as many as we can accommodate. However, looking at it from the global perspective, we are now in a globalized world, and it just makes me want to ask the question. Lowering that cutoff makes me want to ask the question of if our educational system is actually doing the best that it should do, considering the fact that as then when Jamb started, we hardly get students that get even up to 300 in their Jamb scores. And the cutoff was quite high then. If we are not even getting up to 300 students with 300 Jamb scores, having cutoff for, I remember the first Jamb I wrote, I had 193. And I couldn't secure admission because 193 was considered to be very poor. Very poor. And the second Jamb I wrote, I had over 200. And so since then, all the Jambs I've written, I had 200 and above. But generally, I still couldn't secure admission.
The Jambs that you've written, how many Jambs did you write?
Well,
yeah. Okay. Let's not talk about that.
It's quite, no, the point is, my point of emphasis is that our educational system is, with this, is showing that we're not doing well in our educational system.
You don't think, well, let me let you land on that before.
Yeah, yes. Because if we're getting lesser score, higher score, and the cutoff is dropping, it means that there is a problem with either the way we acquire the score or the reason why we are pushing for a lower score. So we need to look at the possibility of having, and considering the fact that we're not going to a globalized world, we are not competing with ourselves. We're not competing with other countries. You're not with the way AI is coming to balance job. AI is going to balance the concept of work, redefine the concept of work. We should begin to look at the possibility that we're not just competing against ourselves. So you are not going to look for a job against another Nigeria that is based in probably the south or the east or the north. You are looking for a job against somebody that is in another part of the world. And your educational skill, it's quite relevant and important, and the ability for you to be able to match up with those of other countries is important. So if we're looking at that perspective, if we're looking at it from that perspective, I think it's, for me, while acknowledging the need to build in more persons and bring in more persons into the higher education system, as long as admission is concerned, we should also look at the possibility of ensuring that we are able to create quality students that we're bringing in. So it's possible to bring in quality students into the educational system without having to drop the cost, the cutoff for admission.
Okay, so you don't drop the cutoff for admission. I get the rationale, the imperatives for creating standards, especially when you look at it globally, globalization, standardization, and all of that, because you're just not competing amongst yourselves internally or nationally, but internationally as well. But you've taken some time, Ainia, to talk about this side of the divide, standards. I'd like for you to take some time as well to look at the argument from the other side. That, look, this other side, these people who are saying, that not everybody may be able to get above 200 or 300 like you got in your second Jamb. There are people who will get like 180, but who should also be allowed to gain admission into school. And there may be plenty like that. And that's why they are saying, look, let us also create access, more access for people. After all, this year alone, we're talking about 1.5 million writing Jamb. By 2030, we're looking at 5 million writing Jamb to gain access to university. How do we then accommodate them if these marks or cutoff marks are too high and people are unable to gain access to? That's, the other side of the argument.
Okay, so there are many ways to solve the problem of numbers. There are many, many ways to solve the problem of numbers. One of it is to, in fact, the Jamb cutoff, the Jamb purely, that 150 is purely for universities. So it invariably means polytechnics cutoff will be lower. College of Education cutoff will be lower. So if you don't meet the cutoff for university, you can pursue your higher education. It's still an higher education system for polytechnic, towards polytechnic. That's one way we can do that. Second way we can do that is to increase the numbers of educational institutions that we have. If we are expecting, that is where planning comes to play. So if you are expecting to have 5 million applicants for Jamb in a couple of years' time, what stops you from increasing the numbers of universities or the numbers of higher institutions that you have? So it means that we need to begin to put more budget into our educational sector so that we'll be able to erect and bring forth new higher educational systems. The third angle that I think we can handle this is by democratizing higher institution. How do I mean by that? Now, one of the reasons why we have so much lag behind when it has to do with higher education and wanting to always put everybody that comes to apply is because we have not explored the option of online studies. Globally, that's what's been done. Globally, it's been acceptable. So we've not really been able to design a system that accepts our online studies as a system of education in this part of the world, and that's why we are finding it difficult to manage the numbers. We're a country of over 200 million persons, and that invariably means we have 60% of that numbers are youth. So you would definitely have the issue with numbers. So how to manage the numbers should be what we should begin to look at, and not give access to people without some form of quality, because if we want to just push everybody to higher institution, would end up graduating people that are not employable eventually, which would show in the economy, because by the time there is low productivity, it will affect the GDP of the country. So we need to look at a way of balancing it. I believe if we are able to design a system of online education whereby as many persons can also, and it's flexible, it's something that one can, as a country, we can design and make it, plug it into what we currently have. If we're able to do that, I believe within a short in no distance time, we'll be able to accommodate as many persons as possible. There are many universities that are doing it globally, acceptable globally, but we've not just been able to phantom how we can build in online system of education into our curriculum and into our educational system. But I believe we can do that, and once we do that, we'll be able to accommodate as many persons as possible.
You know, you've thrown quite a bit out there. You've talked about increasing or creating more access, you said more universities. That's when, in fact, the concept of massification comes in. And I'll take you up on that in just a bit. Yet again, you've talked about options. And I think this is quite instructive because we already have options here. We have the universities, we have the polytechnics, we have the colleges of education. I mean, and these are options that are viable for people. But, you know, there's something with university education. It will seem like it is like a status thing for us here. When you go to the polytechnic, it doesn't sound as nice when your father introduces you as my son just graduated from university, you know. It's more like a status thing here for and that is just this, me joking there. But more seriously, there's something I'd like your take on, and this is something I consider equally germane to this whole discourse, and something I also gleaned, you know, from the piece I read from Comrade Mekudi's writing that I found quite reflective. He talked about the Jamb result not even being the problem at all. He said that is a symptom. He appears to think that the deeper issue is a broken pipeline that starts from basic education and ends at the gates of the universities. So I think what it means there is that it goes back to foundational literacy, the quality of education that we provide at the level of basic education, at primary school level. So my question to you then is, how can we evolve a national framework to align, you know, basic to tertiary education in line with global standards? That standard that you've talked about, like it's obtained in other parts of the world. What do we need to do? What needs to happen at that foundational level, that level of primary school, to make aspiring pupils, you know, primary school pupils like you see in China, they begin to aspire for tertiary education. So how can we align, you know, such pipeline here so that as you aspire for undergraduate university studies, you know, you're already set or you're prepping even from primary school.
Okay, so the challenge is not, okay, now let me even start from the perspective of the fact that when it has to do with education, most parents, picking it from the private angle now, most parents would want to just send their children out of the house because they need to go to work. Not really, they are not really particular about what they are learning from, the method at which they are being taught. They are not particular about who's teaching them. They are not particular about the person that is teaching them. Most basic schools, it's SSU holders that are teaching these students. So if we have SSU holders as those that are taking the
not professional teachers, no.
There are schools that you get professional teachers. But you can I bet you there are schools you will go to and you find out that there are SSU holders that are taking the children there. I'm not talking about government schools, I'm talking about private schools, because the government schools are not enough to accommodate everyone. So, and moreover, there is now the business angle to schooling. So we need to be intentional about who takes our students, our children, what level of qualification they have, how were they trained, or how are they trained, as long as the teachers are concerned. So, but beyond that, there's also another perspective. There's the perspective of us, even what are they being taught? Because it's not just about taking a child to school and the child coming back from school by 2 or by 3. You need to know what exactly these children have been taught. We've grown beyond the stage where what you just go to school to do is just to repeat what the teacher is saying in class. We've grown to a stage where globally what we're looking at is how to build certain soft skills, because it is at this point that you build your soft skills. What are the soft skills that needs to be built when it has to do with your basic education? You are expected to build your problem-solving skills. It is at this point that children are expected to learn how to solve problems. You are expected to build your creative intelligence skills. It is at this point that children are supposed to learn how to be creative. You are expected to build your practicability skills, how you can be given a solution and you apply that problem, how you can give in something and you apply it to situations and use it to solve problems. You are expected to build your communication skills. It has largely been English. English is just a means of communication. English is largely divided into 4 aspects. There is a speaking aspect of English. There is a writing aspect of English. There is the listening aspect of English, and there is the reading aspect of English. These 4 aspects of English needs to be properly indoctrinated into our children. So it's not just about you learning to communicate with one language, but go beyond just your ability to speak, to be able to write, to be able to read, to be able to listen. Many of us will say, yeah, I can write, I can read, I can speak, but many people don't even know how to listen. They don't know how to decode things. So we need to look at that aspect. So we need to redesign the curriculum for our basic education to be able to capture some of these things. And if we are unable to capture these things, it's going to end. It's going to end in the situation that we find ourselves now, because there are a whole lot of skills that are coming up with the whole AI. Things are evolving. It's even at this point we begin to learn emotional intelligence. We begin to learn emotional intelligence at this point in time. We've not started. Nothing like that is in our curriculum. We are supposed to learn financial literacy at this basic start. But what we're learning is math. It's not as though that math is not good. Math is good, but financial literacy tends to be more practical and something that they should learn. They should learn how to save. They should learn how to. These are things that are needed at this point in time, and these are skills that are needed, that will be needed even while they get into higher education. So I believe once we are able to redesign the curriculum, redesign the structure how this curriculum is being taught, I think we'll get better students that will acquire better scores when it has to do with Jamb scores.
So what you've just painted is the gap, and this is not a seeming gap. This is a gap that actually does exist. The gap between the town, or rather between the gown and the town. You know, that is the gap between what you're taught in school and the realities out there.
True.
You know, and I get a sense of what you mean when you say our curricula, whether at the primary level, at the senior secondary level, or even at the tertiary level, isn't designed to meet or close these gaps. And that is something you and I would talk about down the line, and how to redress, or what we need to do to close that gap and have a curricula which speak to our current realities. There are gaps in agriculture, gaps in infrastructure, there are gaps in finance. I mean, there are gaps that exist in almost every sector of our national life. How do we use practical knowledge to close these gaps using education? And, you know, like they say, education, the level of education of a country determines the level of development of such a country. But let me now backtrack a bit and take you back to our peg. Our peg is Jamb scores of cut-off scores of 150. And we've talked about options and some of the issues that you've talked about. I do not want to overflog the issue. You know, we're talking, after all, about Nigeria's survival in an age where knowledge economy reigns. And like you've just beautifully outlined there. So let me not overflog the issue on our enrollment figures, you know, university enrollment figures. But I do know, I don't know whether I've brought that up, that there's a projection that by 2030, the figures of applicants into Nigerian universities would peg, or would clinch 5 million. I mean, you've talked about creating, I think you talked about creating more schools or opening more universities. That is the concept known as massification. It is the rapid expansion of access to universities and colleges. It's not just a global trend. We've seen that even play out here in Nigeria. But then, and this is my question to you, how can we prevent a situation where this massification, this rapid creation of access to more colleges and universities does not collapse into mediocrity, the same thing we're trying to avoid, especially in a society like Nigeria? You know, do you think agencies or supervisory organizations like the NUC are doing enough in terms of quality assurance to ensure that some of these new schools, these expanded schools, that, you know, they are holding them accountable for quality?
So, NUC, as long as NUC is a national body, and because it's a national body, it's like a 1 point of accreditation. And it's a system that has worked in some countries, and there are countries where a national body is ascertained to be the only accreditation body. While there are some countries where what happens is that there are accreditation body, and those accreditation body are now being checkmated by a national body. So, and I think that system is going to best fit into the massification of tertiary institutions, because we have less than 300 universities in Nigeria, and NUC, with what it's doing, is doing its best. But when we begin to have up to 1,000, 1,500 universities, it may eventually become a challenge for them. And one way they can do that is by designing a system whereby there are accredited bodies. What that means is NUC would not directly accredit a university. Instead, they will accredit certain accreditation institutions that would in turn now accredit those universities. And those accreditation institutions can be specialized institutions, like accrediting ICANN, for example, to be the one accrediting universities that are running accountancy program, or accrediting
finance-based programs.
Finance-based programs, sorry. Accrediting the Nigerian Computer Society will be in turn will be the one accrediting all computer-based programs. So with that, it's easier to manage those accreditation body and allow those accreditation bodies to in turn administrate or accredit universities, thereby ensuring that universities know that, okay, it's not just a 1 point of failure. While we are managing NUC as an accreditation body, we are managing ICANN as an accreditation body, we are managing these organizations as an accreditation body. So the university it's easier for the university to have it's easier for them to bring forth qualitative students because it's not just they are not just dealing with one accreditation body, but they are dealing with various accreditation body that are accrediting specific courses as against the NUC accrediting all the courses. Meanwhile, they may not be professional in all the courses because it's a broad field. So I think we should begin to look at that perspective of accreditation as against to having a single point of failure where NUC is the overall accreditation body. That's just my perspective to it.
Interesting concept, I should say. Interesting take there. I mean, getting specialized bodies to also accredit specialized disciplines and courses in school. I think it's something NUC, I beg your pardon, should perhaps take a look at. And quite an intriguing explanation there. I would like to take you back to the whole issue you talked about earlier when you talked about the distance between the gown and the town, about curriculums, or curricula, I beg your pardon, not fitting to, to our current realities. There was something that Comrade Mekudi said in his piece, and but this time he talked about, he somewhat described it as a future-proofing curriculum by Nigerian universities, and that's exactly what I referenced earlier when I said the gap between the gown and the town. He talked about our university system not aligning with national development and curricula not reflecting Nigeria's real world needs, whether it's in areas like agriculture, whether it's in areas like technology, even in governance, in entrepreneurship and innovation. When I said we'll talk about this, I would like for you to just perhaps talk a bit more on this and tell us how you think we can ensure that universities do not just graduate people, but they solve problems. Every year, you and I know this, research papers are commissioned and published, many of them left to the dustbins of history. Yes, we have TED Fund, we have other research funding agencies, but why is it that all of this is not necessarily translating to development on a scale or the scale that it should be nationally? How do we redress all of that?
It's sad, but I think the challenge with our higher educational curriculum is that the courses that students take within the higher education systems are too much.
Okay.
And many of which are not relevant in real life situations. Would be the borrowed courses, like the elective courses or the general courses, they are just extensively much for one to be able to pick a field. When I was taking my degree, my degree wasn't from a Nigerian university.
Okay.
I recall the total number of courses I took for my 4 years program was 40. And I can sit here and count up till now. I can give you the list of about 23 of them that are core computer science related courses. I started taking AI as way back as even in my university as a course. Before people started talking about AI, I started doing statistics, learning hands-on statistics, R programming as a course. Before people started talking about data science. So we are not futuristic enough to look at what's happening in the global trend and begin to prepare people for the future. We wait for the future to meet up with us. And once it meets us, we'll now begin to catch up. Meanwhile, while we are trying to catch up, the future is not waiting. It's also growing and it's also pacing forward. So we need to begin to look at how we will be futuristic in the curriculum that we have developed. I know fully well that there is now from the BMAT, there is now the CMAT, NUC system that they are trying to develop, or that has been accredited by a new structure anyway of accreditation for NUC. But I still believe that the numbers of courses taken by university students are too much and should be cut down. This is my perspective. This is my opinion. And this is from a standpoint of what I've experienced. I've learned, in my university days, I learned hands-on because the numbers of courses were shorter. I started doing emotional intelligence in university as a course. Okay, these are courses that applies to my real world situation, to what I am first passing through now, or what I am solving now. So if we begin to look at how we can develop courses that attend to not just our today's needs, but the needs of the future, I think we'll be able to build in, students will be able to concentrate and focus on a particular area, and we'll be able to build quality students, and students that would be employable. Because you can't take 150 courses and others you have to take them in four years.
I hope undergraduates in school, especially maybe those intending to read mass comm, are no longer studying typewriting, because I did.
Okay, well, you'll be shocked that there are universities that will still be doing that.
No, I doubt that.
If you're
watching on your one of such schools, please stop. Nobody uses typewriter for anything.
It can be for history purposes.
Let me thank you so much. I know Amisu Jafaru, educationist and IT expert. I would like to thank you so much for joining me on Insight. It's been quite insightful, I should say. I mean, as always, of course. I mean, having you here. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure being here.
Today on Insight, we gathered not just in mourning, but to honor the life and legacy of former President Muhammadu Buhari, a soldier who became a statesman. His unwavering dedication to Nigeria across decades of service leaves an indelible mark on our nation's journey.